Hello, it's a pleasure to join GeeCON. It was always my dream to speak at GeeCON, I have to say. Today I wanted to talk to you about refactoring organizations, which is a title used specifically because I wanted to tell you that you can use engineering tools to redesign your organization without any others, almost. Okay, so agenda. I wanted to talk to you, why do we want to do it? Start with some basics, tell you a little bit about strategy and what you can do to improve your understanding of the strategy. Discuss how we can understand our business. So here comes DDD and event storming. How you can review your teams. There is a very interesting tool in DDD toolbox called context mapping, very rarely used, but from my perspective, one of the most powerful. Team topologies, and how you can combine all of them to design your teams. Okay, so we wanted to talk about optimal productivity, right? Who would like to, hands up, if you would like to work in a more productive organization or more productive team? Okay, you're in a good room. So, if you reach out to the market, you might be tempted that there will be a pill that you can swallow and everything will be sweet and dandy. And that pill looks like this. So there might be a ready-for-you solution. They will tell you, you have everything in this picture. You just use whatever we tell you, and you will have productive teams. If you're not fancy of this one, you can use auto-scrum. That's the only moment I will use the word Scrum today. So you can use the auto Scrum instead, and this is how it looks like. Even more beautiful, even more complex. I'm really sorry. Okay. And you will be successful. That's the promise, right? So people get certified and they help their customers. There is a little bit caveat. They do give discounts to loyal customers, so if you don't succeed, you're happy to get a discount at the next time. So, I have to say, this is me when I look at it. It cannot be undone. You need to wash your eyes and really unlearn. Because as an engineer, what I find interesting about this is there is 0 engineers in these frameworks, like 0, and we're building products. There is 0 engineering practices, almost. There is only 1 DevOps as a practice in SAFe at the latest release. But the most important, 0 users. I can challenge you, you can go look at the picture because I tried to look and find the user in this whole framework. So, if you're happy with that solution anyhow, the talk is over. You can go and enjoy your coffee and have fun, have the rest of the afternoon, right? But if you want to get your hands dirty, please stay with me because that's what we like to do, right? That's what we like to do as engineers. So, I'm Wojtek. I was told once that it's a very wrong picture of me because of COVID happened to me, and I started to exercise a little bit more. So I'm working on a daily basis now with Revolut as a head of engineering, so really happy to talk to you about my experience with Revolut. You won't find me on Facebook, you will find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, so happy to get connected. So, now if you're stayed, let's ask as an engineer, why would you do it? So why would you change your organization? I need to say, as an engineer, not as a consultant, you don't need to. You can be happy with what you have, and that's okay in most cases. So you can stay with what you have. Please be aware of all of the agile coaches that you have in your organization. They will run retro with you, so you can complain about the color of your chair. But if you want to work with the more optimal organizations, I have news for you. we will need to look at engineers into the whole topic. I think you recognize it as a Conway's law. So we're talking about more productive, more optimal organizations. There is a Conway's law, and it's called a law because we found it to be universal, like the law of gravity. So wherever you are, the Conway's law will fall on you, right? Yeah, so it says, basically speaking, that our architecture, our integration patterns, they will reflect the communication structures of our organizations. So in other words, if that's the universal law, I encourage you, let's start with that. So my goal here is to talk to you about high-performing teams. So how can we get our teams to be well-focused, well-integrated, well-structured, highly motivated, and autonomous, but using engineering practices, tools, and principles. Okay, the basics. Because we need to start with understanding who we really are and the teams. If we want to get our teams more productive, we need to understand first. These are teams, and teams are actually people, real human beings. So as engineers, it's probably one of the hardest part of our career step, that you need to step out of your comfort zone and you need to talk to people. If you studied in Polish, there was a saying when I studied that I haven't studied IT, so computer science, to talk to people. So the joke is actually, I really have some good news for you. You need to learn how to do it. So that's the important part. And if you want to understand as a leader, people first understand what drives them. So what makes them to want to come to you as a leader on the Monday morning and work together with you on the product. So there is an excellent book on the topic called Drive by Daniel Pink, and I do recommend it. The second thing I would say, understand what inspires people. So why do they want to get involved even more, especially with the job market that we have at the moment, which is really, as you know, very competitive. And we need to be able to attract really good talent. When you have that talent, understand what empowers people. So what makes them want to actually be more productive, produce really great products, and so on and so forth. So step up in their game. And understand what constitute high-performance teams. There are a number of books on the topic. I do recommend starting with Accelerate and DevOps Handbook, of course. So these are really interesting books. Accelerate actually is a study, and they have a really also interesting, from my perspective, part about the science behind the book. So if you haven't read it, I do recommend it. There is a fifth ingredient that I would encourage you to study and learn, is what burns people out. Because you can measure burnout. So it can be one of your heuristics, how you actually work with your teams. You need to understand, why are you losing good people? I haven't found a really good book on the topic, but there is an excellent paper and work by Professor Roger Griffith. So if you have something on the topic, I'd love to talk to you, but I found that it's really important to find this part and as a leader. So to understand what makes people want to leave your team. Okay, so these are the basics. Now let's move on. I would say as an engineer, coding in most cases is an easy part. So from my perspective, it's all of this cognitive work that needs to happen before the coding that is really hard. Once you crack it well, the coding is really easy. So from my perspective, understand why and what do we need to model with our software or data systems, and then start to do the job. I know that when we were young, we usually do the other way around. So starting with understanding the business, there are a number of tools. If you want to, that's the one that I'm usually using without making too much confusion with the business or with the team. So Lean Canvas, you probably are aware of it. It's a very interesting tool because it requires to be very specific. We engineers love that, right? It's only one page. I can read it in 15 minutes. So it's lovely, but it's really hard to get it right because it's only one page. So with one company that I was working with, when I asked them about the problem, they gave me 120 pages. So that's I really wanted to understand who really read it, would be apart from the author. And all of it is really interesting. Happy to talk to you how I used it. But I would focus on today on a couple of parts of the Lean Canvas. So first, that you work with the Lean Canvas is customer segments. So understand really well who are your customers, who are your users. You can add here early adopters as well. So who will be our really great testers? The second part is understand the problem. That's a very tricky part because usually we're not really good as businesses to understand our problems. I challenge you to prove me otherwise, but most of the businesses that I worked with are not really good with it. There comes the very interesting part that you work, usually I work on as a third, not as the fifth, is actually unique value proposition. It's very different from business model canvas because business model canvas has unique selling point. And here we're talking about unique value proposition. As engineers who worked with Lean or with DDD, you probably recognized it. This is exactly why are we building this solution. A very interesting from our perspective will be also unfair advantage. I will come back to that. So it's the question to the business and to our people who are working on the strategy, what makes us much better than our competition. Okay, so if we've done the business, Lean Business Canvas, we have these 5 questions answered. So what is the problem that I'm trying to solve as a specialist? Who am I solving it for? So our users. What is our unique value proposition? We can also extend it by value stream mapping if you know it. What is our solution? And why is the solution better than the competition? So unfair advantage. Now, let's move on. So we have the basics, we have the strategy, and we want to look at our teams and their communication patterns. And my point, the core point of my talk today is you can design teams and their communication patterns just as we design other parts of the system. And you can use actually the really proven tools to do it. So, again, why? To build successful projects from my perspective, we really need to understand our business. That's why I really encourage you to start with the questioning, start with asking the business why. Why are we doing it? So what's the value for the users? And never stop challenging the business. And before, it's very easy to start working on something, coding, and we are usually taught to do it, right? Because when we talk to our business, when we talk to our users, we model data, we model our services, we model our tables in the databases, and so on and so forth. But usually, we get it really, really wrong because we start from the solution, not from the very beginning. So that's where domain-driven design comes in. So, probably, how many of you used any? Maybe I should be more specific. How many of you did you read any book on DDD? Blue one, red one, or okay, that's great. Thank you. How many of you did event storming? Okay. So, if you learned event storming and you're a really big fan of it, you probably are really excited. That's a very powerful tool. I'll come back to it. And you say, of course, we do domain-driven design. We have securers, and we do the stickies or the Miro, right? And we're having discussion about the boundaries of our aggregates. And I would challenge you, if you're discussing too much, or start the discussion, because that's where most of the engineers come into the DD, discussions about, okay, what are the patterns and the best practices for value objects, entities, or what are the boundaries of the aggregates, or should we use this or that for the persistence, and how? My point is you're probably not understanding DDD, and you're not really unleashing the power of DDD in full for you and for your team. So what can we do? Well, why is it really important as well? So when you build a system, there will be, and design your teams, when you're working with your teams, there will be hidden constraints in your teams as well, and within your system and your product. And I would say your goal is also to understand these constraints, because otherwise we're talking about these DDD technical patterns very often, or we try to implement very complex systems, but we will be limited by our constraints. We won't use it for our advantage. So that's where all of these technical conversations that really don't lead to solutions comes in. So you really need, I would encourage you really need to do it. And coming back to DDD, there is a strategic and so-called socio-technical part of DDD. And from my perspective, the key values that you can take out of strategic DDD is you understand the business language. That language describes whatever the business process we have in our products, in our systems. And then, when you know the boundaries of different domains, you can feel the subtle domains and the differences, and you can discuss these constraints. And then you can map them. If you map them, you can look at everything what you map together with your teams, and you can actually do some actions. Just to recap, and for people who are not familiar with DDD, so we have our problem is called domain. The business problem, and we have different subdomains. There is a core domain, subdomain, so that it's a type of the subdomain which is really connected to our competitive advantage and unfair advantage. That's why I said that I will come back to the lean canvas, because that helps me usually with the conversation with the business. Okay, what is our core domain? Why is it so important to me? I'll come back to that. But this is really why your business is so successful. There is a supportive type of subdomains, so anything that is supporting the core but is not granting you competitive advantage, look at Business Canvas, and cannot be easily bought off the shelf, right? So that's this part. And generic subdomains are the ones that are quite complex. Usually we love to develop them, but you can easily outsource them and buy them off the shelf without losing competitive advantage or risking that your knowledge will leak to the other companies. A good example, in most cases, if you're not invoicing company, invoicing is a very complex generic subdomain that many of the companies are trying to build for themselves. There might be others, but this is a very good example. So, if you need help with dividing your whole business domain, so your whole business product into subdomains, there comes event storming. This is a result, from one of our trainings. This is an example of event storming board, so-called big picture. So that's the whole process, all of the business events that happen in the process. You can see it's quite complex, but you can see that it's quite clear, right? And it was the result of many iterations. So I would say, don't be afraid if you haven't got it after the first time or the second time. That actually probably was built after 5 or 6 sessions. The first one was probably quite extensive, but later on you speed up, you add, you're able to actually really nicely divide your problem into different subdomains. That's what we really wanted. Why do we want it? And what can we get from it? Because I would say there are some interesting patterns that, that comes with subdomains. So with core, usually that's the, if you think this is the competitive advantage of your company, right? So probably you want to have your best engineers, your most brilliant minds working exactly on that, because any work, any code, any machine learning models they build, they will build up your competitive advantage, and therefore your company will be harder to copy. So you really want to invest your best brains there. And I would also say, this is the part of the system that really needs to be open for very rapid changes. So use whatever the best patterns you have, whatever your team can use, and make sure that you encourage the team to relearn and rebuild that part of the software. Supportive. That's a very interesting part, because very often supportive subdomains are really over-engineered. And from my perspective, if you really ask the right questions, you can generalize most of the supportive domains into simple CRUD systems. So forms that ask users for data or display something. So from my perspective, as a leader, this is a really interesting part of the system, because that's where we can train our new joiners and test them before they go into deeper parts of our system, right? And generic. Well, if your policy is to build it, you need to build it, right? But in most cases, you can actually ask software houses to build it for you and support it for you, as well as you can buy them off the shelf, or for instance, as a software as a service. Nobody needs another email sending engine, right? There are so many great companies that do that. So why would you build one, for instance? Now, a question to you. If we have these subdomains, now you can feel that there are teams that are building these subdomains for us. Who do you think is responsible for the boundaries between these teams, and how do they grow? So the company one day was established, perhaps there are product owners, and they grown their responsibilities and influence of the system. So a pause here to think about that. If you can shout if you have an answer. Okay? From my perspective, too often, as for an engineer, they often in the organic evolution. So from my perspective, yeah, I'll do it, and my team will do it. I say as a product owner, maybe I want to get promoted. What do I say? I'll do it. And sometimes it's even worse, because that involves politics. And by politics, I mean this undefined, invisible net of connections and dependencies that we are not aware of that may impact our decisions without us knowing that. But from my perspective, yeah, we can do better. So if we have our domains, what you can do, knowing that there is a core supporting and generic parts of your systems, you can put them on the map, and a simple, very simple map. On the one axis is business logic complexity. You can feel it, that you can have meaningful conversations to understand where it should be on this axis, and you can have business differentiation. And these are your strategic tools and strategic conversations with the business. Now, if you do it, what do you see? Well, you can actually map talent and domain experience distributions. That's what I've done. So in other words, I have these subdomains, so there are teams behind them, and I can actually understand, okay, what kind of people are there? What is their seniority? How long are they with the company? Therefore, what's their domain expertise? And so on and so forth. What are we just doing? We're making a really important map, because we understand who is behind our subdomains and what are the teams that are building it. Really informed decisions. Now you can also review, that's the second part. You can find work by Adam Thornhill very, very interesting and very useful here. So he built this tool called Code Scene, and that can give you, as an engineering manager or leader or CTO, that can give you a very good insight into exactly what is in your code, who is working on it, and so on and so forth. So you can help building some of that analysis with these tools. If I do it, I have a really interesting insights. And these are, as you can see, no bullshit, no coaching. This is a really good engineering set of conversations. Is, do I invest as the company in the right domains? In other words, if we know that, for instance, I know that I don't have a laser, but there is a core subdomain called campaign fundraising. If I don't have my best people and most of my people working on core domains, it means that I'm investing in something that doesn't bring the competitive advantage. I need to move probably these people there, right? And I can also review now by using some informed analysis, okay, do I have the right engineering patterns? Do I have the right data patterns used in this? For instance, the supporting, as we said, that in most cases I can ask generalizing questions, and I will come out with really simple, plain forms in most cases. But in core, for instance, as we discussed, I really want my best patterns to be used, whatever my team can use. Now, if you're really interested on the topic, I do recommend taking a picture, and that's an excellent presentation by Nick Thune at DDD Europe in 2020 called Dissecting Bounded Context. The whole presentation is really about this topic. Now comes context mapping. Hands up if you ever used context mapping. Okay. So I do encourage you to actually look at it if you're interested in the topic. This is mapping your subdomains, bounded contexts, and teams into the integration and collaboration patterns. So you understand exactly how your teams are doing at the moment. So there are so-called integration patterns. So for instance, and we want to have informed engineering decisions, right? Not something that will grow up by itself. So we have integration patterns like shared kernel, which means two teams will share the same code. That requires a lot of collaboration. That requires excellent communication between them. There cannot be any conflicts. So whatever technically how they integrate, that's really important as well, because they will be probably working on the same base code. There is partnership. When, for instance, if you work in sprints, you need to align these teams very, very well. Again, communication is really important. Customer and supplier. So when my team asks your team to do something and you respond to me, okay, we'll do it in whatever, a month or so. There is a conformist, so there is one team, probably very close to CTO, by the way, which tells everyone else, you need to do it because. Of course, with the CTO, I hope it was a joke. And there is a separate ways. So you actually tell, together with the teams, you make informed decisions. You don't need to work together at all. And when you have that, you can actually use some DDD patterns to make the collaboration between these teams a little bit easier. So we don't have too much time to dwell into it. Happy to discuss it. There is an excellent presentation that I will recommend. But of course, if there is a team that enforces all the time some changes, disrupting other teams, well, there is a pattern to do it, to actually stop these interruptions and make both teams to work really, really smoothly. So, if you're Polish-speaking person, Mariusz Gil had excellent talk that was released probably this week or the previous one with Łukasz Szydło. On autonomy of changes in the microservices architecture. sorry. And I really do recommend it. Half of it will be about the context maps. If you're really interested in the topic, I would recommend the talk about this by Michael Plitt, context map a deep dive. The problem is when you read Evans, context maps are there. When you read other books, context maps will be there, but there won't be any good examples, so you won't find how powerful this tool is. But from my perspective, when you understand what teams you have, this tool allows you to understand how they can work, how they work at the moment, and then you can do another map. What if they do something like this? And you can understand the whole chain of dependencies between teams, how would that affect or the collaboration between these teams. Now, if you're interested in the topic of how to make different teams collaborating efficiently, there is a good news. There is a book called Team Topologies. By the way, I was given with a number of copies, so I have one copy with me. It will be at the Revolut booth for you to win if you want to. So please do come by later on. So this is an excellent book from my perspective that really touched on a number of topics by really experienced engineers. So how to make a really efficient and optimal teams. Now, Team Topologies, among a lot of stuff, discuss that there are 4 different types of the teams. And you need to, as a leader, your job is to make informed decision on what type of the team you're leading, or it will be, right? And how they will collaborate. So there is a stream-aligned teams. Most of the teams that we work in are stream-aligned teams. So it's a single stream work, so usually working on one of these subdomains. They have their own backlog, very likely their roadmaps. The idea is that they should be as autonomous as possible, meaning they should be able to, as possible, release the changes, build changes and release changes without being disrupted. So this is the first type of the team. The second type of the team will be enabling team. So the responsibility of the enabling team is to grow the streamlined teams. So if you have really good mentors, if you're big enough, if you have really good mentors in your organization, you can form so-called enabling team that will proactively look for improvements, tooling, practices, principles, and work with the supporting streamlined teams to be better in engineering. So for instance, if you, whatever you call them, like a DDD guild, if you have really good experienced teams on, team members on DDD, you can form an enabling team for DDD and actually ask that team to work together with the others to improve. But that's not only, of course, about DDD, that's about pretty much anything. So if you have really good guardians for your practices, that would be a very interesting idea to use that. There are complicated subsystems teams. That's the third type of the team. So these teams usually reduce cognitive, their goal is to reduce cognitive load for stream-aligned teams. I think you know what I'm talking about when I say reduce cognitive load. If you have inside your companies any bloody complex system that you need to use, and you really don't know how, and you need to talk to your whoever, DevOps, SysOps, big data operations, and so on and so forth, that will be your complicated system. So you can actually form and make the design teams, these teams as complicated subsystems teams, and their job will be to acquire and work with this part of the systems which are really hard to get into. So I was, for instance, working with Hadoop many years ago. So that would be a really good candidate to get into a complicated subsystem team. And there is the fourth type of the team. Not in every company that it will exist, but in many bigger companies it does. But it's also probably uninformed. It's in a meaning it's not by design. It's a platform team. So whatever tooling that we need as developers, this will be our platform team. And of course, in the book, you can read what best practices to use for each type of the team. So I encourage you to look into it. Now, how these teams can collaborate? Well, the authors talk about 3 different types of collaboration. So there will be so-called collaborations, so teams working very, very closely, shared requirements, shared insights, shared learnings, shared postmortems, whatever is required. But as you can imagine, that requires quite a lot of communication, right? They need to be on the same meetings. They need to do a lot of meetings. They need to use the same tools. So it's quite a loud cooperation, but gives really good results for streamlined teams, especially. So if we're building this new product that requires 2 of our teams to work closely together, this is what we can do together, right? And the team topologies encourages us to build a contract between these two teams. So for this period of time, we will be working closely together. There is a second type of collaboration and integration, acts as a service. So it can be seen as, for instance, in some organizations, we release our services as an API, for instance, and we are responsible for this API, and we provide you with really good documentation, we will extend it if necessary, and so on and so forth. So in other words, the communication is much lower, but because of the documentation is usually really good, the developer's experience is really good. It's really easy to use. Really recommended for platform teams and complex systems. And the third one is facilitating. So if you have one team that can teach and coach and mentor the other team, that's where the facilitation usually comes in, and you will be rewarded by actually getting the feedback from this team, and you will be able to actually understand what are our problems, what we can improve firsthand. Really powerful, but rarely used from my experience, sadly. Okay. In the book, you will find that you actually can build these whole structures, and you can actually simulate, and that's very important, how different teams collaborate. There is another very powerful part of the book. It's about heuristics of the teams. So in other words, how our teams are performing. So you will be able to find these heuristics in the book. Really interesting part and very useful. There are a number of additional tools worth mentioning that I usually use when I join a new team or I'm asked to help other teams. So you probably heard about worldly mapping. It definitely takes a lot of conferences by a storm, I would say, and it's a very powerful tool to talk to the business, the strategy, the people who are responsible for the strategy about the current situation, how complex it is, and where it should go in the future. So really powerful tool to extend whatever the strategy tools you have in your toolbox. It's not an easy tool. I should start, so it requires you to understand. I mean, it's easy once you learn it, but there is a learning curve. But the community is very open. Every Friday, the author, Simon Wardley, hosts the Twitter Spaces, and you can ask him anything, so he's very, very helpful. Now, the next one, if you want to understand the impact of your change and you need to talk to your business about the changes that you want to make, I would recommend looking into impact mapping by Wojtek Edits. I really like using service blueprints as well. That's a pretty, I think, UX tool in the essence, but it allows us to map the users, the values, different parts of the system and how they go together along the user journey in our application. So very powerful tool. And last but not least on this list is C4 model. It's a lovely tool. Actually, I do use it quite a lot. So when I have this bounded context, I usually jump into every single one of them, create a C4 model with the team. I understand really well, elegantly, what do I have in my system, how it's all connected, right? Personally, the note at the bottom, I extended the C4 model by using user stories. So you can actually see how how many of you, I'm sorry, I should ask, how many of you did use C4 model? Okay, for those of you who haven't, the C4 model is about building a map of our system, like the architecture map of our system, really powerful tool, and focus first on the context of our system. So what is, who are our actors, our users, what are they using, what are the external parts of the world that are being used in this context. Then we're talking about containers, so technical components of our system. Then we talk about components, so logical modules, the software that we build, and then we deep dive into classes. So you have like this zoom in from the 10,000 meters and what are we doing and why with who, and then down to classes. Really, really powerful tool. Okay, takeaways, because it's a very broad topic. As you can see, each one of these tools is definitely worth a single given presentation. So my takeaways for you is that please do shift talents between teams and make it an informed decisions. So you usually may have your best talents working not necessarily in increasing your advantage, your business advantage. So look how you can do it differently. So if there is a way to use their brilliant brain power to actually step up the game as the business. Second, shift the responsibilities for subdomains. So we talked about that some of the boundaries between teams grow organically, redesign them, and align them with your bounded context. So parts of your applications which are separated. The third is try to outsource or buy whatever you can, but with informed decisions. So you don't want to buy components for your core subdomains. You definitely want to get these generic components out of the market. Then simplify architecture decisions wherever possible. As engineers, and I am guilty as charged, we love to do overcomplicated architectures. We love to use the hype technologies. There is, of course, the CV-driven development. So I would encourage you, as a leader, make informed decisions. As a team member, make informed decisions. Do we really need that here? Because it will kick us back. Then optimize your integration and communication patterns. So we discuss how you can do it, and there are different ways of looking into how these teams can work together and redesign this a little bit. Then you can actually use all of these tools to simulate the changes. So you have the system and your teams as it is at the moment, but you can also make different types of decisions and simulate it without making any changes with many of these tools and see how it would affect your productivity, how it would affect your capabilities to produce even better the unfair advantage. And I would say implement and repeat. So, as you can see, I did it without any agile frameworks or tools. And I would come back to Mel Conway's law. Who of you did know the Conway's law when you came here? That's very, very good. Thank you. The interesting part is how many few people few people read the paper, because the most interesting part is not this quote that we name as a Conway's law. It's a different part. It's at the very bottom. Mel Conway says that because the design which occurs first is almost never the best possible, the prevailing system concept may need to change. And our responsibility as engineers, as leaders, is not to design the best system, yet we try to do it, right? It's not. It's actually the opposite. We need to understand that our responsibility is actually to build our communication and the teams in the way that they can collaborate, relearn, and be lean and flexible. So that's our responsibility. I think I have a couple of more minutes. So thank you, and we can go straight to the questions. So yep. Happy if you want to chat about this. I used many of these tools for years now. I will be at the Revolut's booth, and happy to have a chat with you about this. If you have any questions, let's go to Slido. Okay. Is there any demotivation risk in segregation projects on core supportive? You people? That's a good question. So I understand this question if I, by design, put people in the wrong buckets, they can be motivated. I would start my questions, what if you don't do it? Does it really work? And does it motivate your people? So to begin with. Secondly, I would say you can have meaningful conversations with developers and engineers, and you can encourage them. I did that in the past. It takes time, but actually you can definitely have this conversation. Some people will want to work with growing other talents, so be mentors. You can put them in more of a supportive domains. Some people will be really hard-code coders. So it will be supportive of a very complicated system. You can put them, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say it's definitely about, it's contextual, but you can definitely do it. How would you deal with maintaining context maps in big-scale organizations? Over 150 dev teams, over 100 microservices, how to ensure that it's valid and up to date? That's a very good question. And I would say probably I wouldn't. Not to the level where every team is responsible to build their C4 maps and so on and so forth. I would, depending on my context, I would probably go and look at my part of the system. Eventually, I would grow the knowledge, also understanding into other parts of the system. But as you can see, doing it for over 1,000 microservices, over 150 dev teams, that's probably, that would require quite a lot of work. Mind you, it might be that if the organization is that big, it's probably using some of these tools in an unconscious way, and maybe what we can do is coordinate their efforts and encourage them to actually implement some of these all together and make the teams to work on this in parallel, right? So I hope that it answers your question. And the third question, how to convince management they're infected with Scrum virus, oh damn, here we go again, to change approach and start using presented process. That's a very good question, but I would start with the conversations that business understands. So, and that's very different to Scrum. Scrum, as you can see, we didn't talk at all how a single team would work. We talked about, okay, how all of these teams can work. If there is a team that wants to use Scrum, that's okay, let them use it. But from my perspective, it's really important for all of these changes to be put in place to actually get a buy-in from both your business, your management, and from your engineering teams. So probably you want to introduce them a little bit step by step. What I'm doing is actually that. So I presented you ready-to-use tools as they're called in the books and some of the practices. When I worked with them with the business or engineering teams, I do not necessarily call them by the name, because if I probably talk to some business people and told them, okay, we're going to do domain-driven design, we're going to build context maps, and we're going to redesign integration patterns between our teams, probably they will look at me as a lunatic. So what you can do is actually you can implement some of these without naming, without using names, and just show the results, because there will be results. Hopefully I answered all of your questions. And with that, thank you. I will be at the Revolus booth.